welcome to the Oxygenaddict Triathlon Podcast. We're brought to you every week by our sponsors, precisionhydration.com.
Precision Hydration offer electrolyte drinks in different strengths to match how you sweat. Personalize your hydration strategy at precisionhydration.com and get a free box or tube of pH worth up to $9.99 using the code Oxygenaddict.
And we're also brought to you by our very kind patrons of the show,
who support the show with a monthly donation, and you can get our 2018 Patrons Only podcast as a thank you.
And that will be out next week. All right, and welcome to the show. I'm very excited. Helen joining us from hot sunny Australia, where she's over with the Commonwealth Games, and we're going to get all the gossip. So we'll jump right into it. What's going on in Australia, Helen? How was it watching the triathlons then? It's been blooming great over here watching it.
Has it gone down well at home, Rob?
Been gone down well in my living room. I can't speak for everybody else. I've been loving it.
Oh, well, it was very, very hot for the women's race, which was the first medal of the games on offer. Really, really boiling. And the men's race was on the same day, but a few hours later, and suddenly the weather changed dramatically.
It looked like Southport.
Honestly, it's just that's when it rains here. It really, really rains. It's just
it was a proper storm, wasn't it? I was watching with a friend and we were laughing. There was a lifeguard on a paddleboard alongside the men's race, getting blown all over the shop, and he couldn't keep up in front of them, then he couldn't stay out the way at the side, and we're going, he's going to get blown in, and you get that shot from above with the drone, like, oh no, he's going to plough through the middle of get out of the way, lifeguard. So it was funny, but yeah, it did look pretty grim actually, and it was one of those. The bike course was really twisty, and they were over the white lines, and you were just like, oh, it was squeezy bottom time, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. But as soon as it started, because honestly, that morning had been really hot for the women's race, and you're thinking, oh, this heat. Oh, how are the brownies doing this heat? And then suddenly the heavens opened, and you're thinking, oh, there you go, it's playing into their hands. So yeah, it was a brilliant day to sort of kick things off in terms of action. And the women's race, well, it was Flora Duffy really went in, didn't she, Rob, as a favourite, and came out as the winner as well. She put together a fantastic race. Jess Learmonth and her worked together, throughout the bike, and then we know that Duffy is a stronger runner than Learmonth, so it was unlikely that Jess was going to be able to hang on to her for that whole 5K, the sprint race. But then it was a question of, is Learmonth going to get caught? And thankfully she didn't. I think she managed to get second by, what was it in the end, Rob? About 5 seconds, wasn't it?
It was 5 seconds, yeah. And the two of them worked together so well on the bike. I mean, she's in a different league as a swimmer at the moment, isn't she? There's only Duffy managed to get sort of anywhere near her. And I think, was it Sophie Caldwell she had a really good swim and was only a handful of seconds down out of the water, but I think I read she was 4 seconds down coming out of T1 and just couldn't get onto the wheel of Duffy. So you think it could all have been so different. If there'd been 3 of them got away together, they might have had, close to 2 minutes, I imagine, on the pack. But yeah, Jess looks super strong on the bike, I thought. And because I was thinking, well, we've heard all these stories about what a great bike handle for Duffy is. Is there a possibility she's going to get dropped? But she never looked in danger of it. She was super strong the whole way round.
Yeah, they really did. And I saw when they were lining up for their medals afterwards, I saw Jess say to Flora, thanks for working together so well.
Nice.
Yeah. So that was really cool. And unfortunately for Vicky Holland this time, she finished 4th, just behind Joanna Brown of Canada, and Non-Stanford also finishing outside the medals. But Rob, it was a really, really good race to watch. And then, of course, we all got drowned in the rain. And then the men's race started. But you're thinking, are they going to delay this? Like, this rain is so heavy. But they didn't. It started. Everyone got very wet in more ways than one. And
it was you I felt sorry for. I was watching the kill. It doesn't matter to the athletes. It really did remind me of like Southport Triathlon. The water looked grey, it looked cold. There was about 17 people spectating because everyone had legged it in to get out of the rain.
Yeah, there was
nothing against Southport for any of our Southport listeners. Please don't write in.
Rob, funnily enough, you know that this is being held in, or the triathlon was held in Broadwater, but Broadwater Parklands in Southport, in Gold Coast.
I had no idea. That's brilliant.
There you go. There you go. So yes, the men's race, Rob, I think people thought, right, well, there we go, Brownies, they're off the bike, they're in that front pack, they're going to run away with it. They did not. They did not, Rob.
I almost wondered whether, I don't know whether I'm right in saying this, but it looked to me like Al Brownlee came out of, I was watching the footage, he came out of T1, it looked like he was doing a max effort, and then Johnny Brownlee came forward, with the second pack, maybe only 10 seconds down or something, and they just, like, the heads were bobbing up and down. It looked like a max effort sprint, and not for a second did it look like they were trying to, sustain any kind of energy for afterwards. And I actually wondered afterwards whether Al had ridden really hard on the front the whole way, almost to try and set it up for his brother, maybe knowing that he wasn't in, because he kind of looked like he knew he wasn't in perfect run form when he did the interviews afterwards. And I wondered whether he was riding really hard to try and sort of sustain the break and get them away almost.
I think he was trying to ride really hard to give himself the chance to
just
get away.
Just because that's how he races, yeah.
No, because he knew that he just didn't have the run training in his legs.
But regardless, it was a masterclass in how to hurt, wasn't it? They just were hammering. Yeah. Everyone was hammering, and I was so happy when, like, Mark Austin was kind of yo-yoing off the back several times, and you were thinking, oh, don't get dropped again after the same thing happened at the Commonwealth. I was just like, please hang on. And then when he did, and he looked so strong on the run, the minute the Brownlees were out, you were like, you've got to root for this underdog here, basically.
It was. I was so happy for Mark Austin, because I don't think within his, within sort of like the Scotland team, I don't think they had necessarily put money on him to come away with a medal. He finished 22nd in Glasgow, and no one would have thought, oh yeah, right. he's gonna get a medal. And I was standing by someone from Team Scotland who was just like, oh my God, this is amazing, what's happening? And so we were then rooting for him, and when he crossed the line and got that third place, it was pretty spectacular performance from him. So Henry Schumann took the win, and then Jake Birtwistle, who I had tipped him, Rob, to do the honours, so I was pretty pleased that he came second. And then Mark Austin finished third. Tom Bishop had a crash, which was really unfortunate for him.
Yeah, he came down in the rain, didn't he? And when you were saying a minute ago about Mark Austin, no one tipping him for medal, when you look at who's in the field, you've got both Brownlees, Henry Schumann, Rich Murray. I mean, it doesn't really get any bigger names than that in that standard of racing. You've also got Tom Bishop racing, you'd have money on him having the medal before Mark Austin, wouldn't you, for sure? Yeah. So, just so chuffed for the lad. I hope he does tons for his confidence going forward, because it just goes to show you just need a bit of luck and good run legs on the day, and who knows what might happen, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And Rob, you remember we spoke to Beth Potter? So Beth was representing Scotland in the triathlon, and then the mixed team relay, and then she was on the track as well. And it was quite funny. Mark was so unprepared to get a medal that he didn't take his tracksuit for the medal ceremony.
Is that
he had
right?
to borrow Beth. This is very right. He had to borrow Beth Potter's. So if you look at the photos, the sleeves come up quite short.
Yes. Do you know what? I've got this up in front of me. You're dead right. We were commenting the other day how most of these tracksuits are kind of made with a never going to be able to be sold on eBay kind of thing in mind, because they're all massive, aren't they?
Yeah.
But his is extremely snug. There you go. Yeah. Good lad. Good inside knowledge.
And then, Rob, so we had the women's race, we had the men's race, and then on Saturday we had the para triathlon and the mixed team relay, and I was delighted for Joe Townsend when he crossed that line in first place.
Just
I had
fantastic.
seen him I had watched him race in Rio and saw him at the finish line completely and utterly spent. He gave it everything. He missed out. This time he gave it everything, and it all came together, and he crossed that line in first place. And it's just, he's such an incredible guy, Rob.
Isn't he?
He did ride across America recently, and I'm sure he told me it was 6 days. I was just like, that's honestly
it's insane. Was it like 3,500 miles?
Honestly, just absolutely phenomenal. So yeah, for him to get that win was brilliant. And also there was Jade Jones took the win as well in the women's race. And again, she's a blinking incredible athlete too, Rob. She does wheelchair racing on the track.
She? Yeah, she's in an absolutely different class.
Yeah. So, and she's a law student as well. So there's loads going on, and then to perform is just fantastic. And Rob, the other one I want to mention is Lauren Parker. We heard her last week, didn't we? Her interview.
Yeah.
And it's a year ago since she had this dreadful crash whilst training for Ironman Port Macquarie. 3 weeks out from that, which left her paralysed, and she only had a go at para triathlon back in November, qualified for Team Australia, for the Australian team, for the Commonwealth Games, and she just wanted to get that message across of wanting to inspire people, but she has absolutely well and truly smashed that. Rob, it was great to see her come away with that bronze medal.
I was in tears, mate, I tell you, quite literally, watching her, especially when she crashed in the home straight. I don't know whether the footage of the clip that I saw at the time, I wasn't sure whether she was in the silver medal position or the bronze medal position at that point. I think, as it turns out, she was already in the bronze medal position, but she came around the corner, she put her head down, and the camera shot it showed on the TV was from the looking down the home straight, and you could see that the hoardings narrowed, and it narrowed like really quickly. She put her head down to keep on pushing, and you were like, oh no, look up, look up, look up. And honestly, I don't know how she got back up from it. The whole chair flipped over and she was upside down, and such a great story. The interview you did with her last week was so incredibly moving, and then to see her get this thing now, this medal, is just great. So I think that's going to be the first we'll see of her. Probably the last time she's on the third place podium for sure. I think there's bigger and better things in her future for sure.
She at the finish, she said that it was such a learning experience. She's got a massive way to go, but this is just the beginning, and Tokyo is her goal. Yeah, brilliant. So Lauren, well done.
Awesome work, Lauren. Right, so we've also had a whole bunch of 70.3 excitement happening this week as well. So we'll probably kick it off, I think, with the results from Oceanside, which was my big focus of watching this was going on, because we had Jan Frodeno taking on Lionel Sanders amongst loads of other people as well. And obviously we knew Lionel was in great shape. We didn't really know what was going on with Frodeno after his sort of performance at Kona last year, and will he recover from injury and stuff. And he came back and he just dominated, didn't he? The course record, fastest swim, fastest bike, fastest run. And Lionel Sanders was on form as well. Lionel was only 2 minutes down on Frodeno out of the water, which is another step change in his swimming. So he's getting better and better, isn't he? Interesting thing for me was, we've seen Sanders put out these incredible bike splits, and just the other day we had people sort of saying, Jan's never been that strong on the bike. Well, he's actually outsplit Lionel Sanders on the bike here, only by 15 seconds, but that's a marker down on the board. And I can't remember where I was reading it now. There was a great interview with him. It might have been on Slow Twitch post-race, where he sort of said he's totally focused ever since Kona. He's been like, right, I've got to get out there and I've got to race my biggest rivals this year. I'm going to hunt them out and choose to race them. I'm going to race Lionel. I'm going to race Sebi. And just get in the mental mindset of racing again. So I just think we are in for such a brilliant year of racing, aren't we?
I can't wait. I really can't wait. I'm already excited about Kona, Bob.
Do you know, it's not even about that anymore, is it? It used to be we'd go, I'm excited for Kona, but we're excited for Roth, we're excited for Frankfurt happening, and God knows where else they're going to race each other. But I think we can look forward to, if Frodeno's going out and looking for people to race during the year, there's not going to be this sense of, we'll have to wait till the end of the year for all the big guns to get back together again. It's like the days when Macca was racing and he'd go and hunt people out and get in their faces to kind of get inside the head before race day. It's going to be...
Psychological edge,
yeah. Totally. So Frodeno wraps it up with a 1:10 half marathon. Sanders is a 1:11 half marathon, and that's second fastest run of the day, but he's a minute back. So just an amazing performance there. I've lost the... Oh, there we go. So it's 3:45 on the nose for Frodeno, 3:48 for Sanders, and Tim Reed gets third in 3:53. So massive, massive gap there to third place. So yeah, great stuff. Ladies' results. We had an amazing win again for Anne Haug, didn't we? She's proved it again. She's putting the fear of God into people, I think.
It's her run, Rob. It is her. She's never ever been the strongest swimmer at all, so she'll always be chasing out the water.
Yeah.
But she can bike, and oh my goodness, she can run. Her run split, wasn't it a 1:16?
It was, yeah. And I feel a little bit bad actually, because after she had that amazing run in Dubai when she ran 1:14, I think I sort of insinuated maybe the course was short, but I'm completely wrong with it. You know, she's 4 or 5 minutes back there on Lionel Sanders and only 6 minutes back on Frodeno. That is absolutely stunning running. I think she was 6 minutes faster than Holly Lawrence on the run, who herself ran 1:22. So just amazing.
It just brings it up another level, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, and this is a thing. It just makes everyone else up their game that little bit more.
Yeah. Holly Lawrence said, I think on Instagram or something, she's like, we knew that she had a killer run, but she can bike as well. I think she outsplit Holly Lawrence on the bike, so exciting times. Has she done an Ironman yet? Has she stepped up to Ironman yet? She hasn't.
She's going to be making her debut, I'm pretty sure, I want to say Frankfurt, Rob.
Right, okay.
So so she hasn't done one yet. But
okay, one to watch then, hey?
Definitely.
I'll pick her as my one to watch for this year, Hels.
Okay, good choice.
Just a little insinuation she might be a little bit handy. Good stuff. And then we're going to jump over to the results from 70.3 Texas, where firstly, I was rooting for Kim Morrison. I was thinking, you know what? She could have this. She's gone 4 minutes faster than last year, which is fantastic. She's unfortunately come up against an amazing ladies field and only finished fourth, but what a field to come fourth against, right?
Absolutely. She was beaten by Mel Hauschild, who took the win, and then Heather Wurtell and Rinny on her comeback after having a baby. That's really not, for Kim Morrison, right up there, Rob, and
that could be the top three in any World Championships, couldn't it? 70.3
exactly.
or Ironman right there.
Completely outclassed everyone on the bike.
Yeah.
And her run as well, Rob, that has improved hugely.
What does she do on the run? Have you got there?
I want to say 1:25.
So solid then, because the two fastest were 1:18 and then Heather ran a 1:20. So yeah, that's really good. She's getting faster and closer all the time, isn't she?
Yeah, exactly. Because I think for a while it would be like a solid 1:28, 1:29.
Yeah.
So yeah, to run 1:25, yeah, fantastic. And everybody knows she's got that incredible biking ability. So, and can she swim. So yeah, Kim Morrison, fantastic result.
Nice stuff. Over in the men's race, we had a great win for Ben Canoe. It's just been announced, Hels, that he's now a Precision Hydration sponsored athlete. He's joined the team there, so that's a nice little tie-in for us, and it's obviously working for him in the heat of Texas, isn't it? He was the Ironman 70.3 World Championship silver medalist, and he takes out the win there in 3:43 from Michael Weiss, and Andy Starkowitz again making a great comeback. He rode 2 hours flat and then held on with a really decent run this time, so there wasn't much in it at all. Also great to see. Do you remember at Kona, Matt Russell he didn't get hit by a car. The car turned in front of him and he went through the side window of the car, didn't he? And everyone thought he was in a life or death situation. He's come back to finish 7th in 3:49. So absolutely brilliant to see he's back in, not just back racing, but back in decent shape when we weren't even sure, touch wood, what situation he was going to be in at all. So that's awesome news.
Yeah, that is really, really good. And Rob, conditions look pretty chilly out there this year in Texas. People were saying afterwards how cold it was and very un-Texas-like weather.
Yeah, it was. I think they had huge rainstorms. One of the guys I coached raced there, and he had 4 flats. He said loads of, I think he said seashells washed onto the road, bizarrely.
Really?
And sliced his tyres open. He had like one of those 3 flats in the same tyre thing, and the third time he realised the tyre was sliced and had to pad it out with something to stop the next tube blowing out. So he said there was a record number of punctures. You were seeing loads and loads of it on the roadside, so that probably had a huge amount to do with it.
It's not what you want.
Not at all, no. So a big shout out to our sponsors there, Precision Hydration. Thanks very much for sponsoring the show. Long-time listeners of the show will already know our love for the Precision Hydration product, but basically it's electrolytes done scientifically. You can have yourself a sweat test done in person, or you can have a sweat test done online to work out what kind of sweater you are, whether you're a heavy sweater or a salty sweater. And typically, if you suffer a lot from cramps, or you suffer a lot in the heat, or especially for guys who've raced long distance in the heat and end up feeling very ill afterwards, electrolytes are very much most probably going to be the issue for you here, and you need to get them sorted. Very, very simple to sort with Precision Hydration. They make an almost tasteless powder that goes in your drink. It's not going to make your drink taste salty like the old ones used to. And you just mix it in with your water or with your gels or your electrolyte mix or your energy mix, and you're good to go. They're absolutely superb. And you can get £10, well, £9.99 worth of Precision Hydration. Just use the code Oxygenaddict and sample it for free. You've just got to pay the postage. You've got nothing to lose, and I guarantee you'll never go back to any other kind of electrolyte drink after you've tried this one. They're just superb. So get on it, and I think we should try and get Ben Canute on the show, leverage a bit of knowledge with the PH guy to see if we can get him on. How's he make an interesting interview, wouldn't he?
Oh, yeah, definitely. From his switch.
One for
Stick him on your list, Rob.
Yeah, get him on that ever-growing list of people we want to have on. Which actually, before we get to this week's interview, we've got legendary triathlon coach Joe Friel on this week. We're going to do our own little bit of coaching advice with Coach's Couch this week. So what I thought we'd do, Hels, we'd talk a little bit about running this week.
Oh, I like talking about running, Rob.
Yeah, well, a bit of talk about running because we mentioned last week Gwen Jorgensen's run coach, Jamie Turner, had made a comment about how slow Gwen's long runs were. And this week in the Team Oxygenaddict Facebook group, there's been loads of comments coming up. Basically, it's that time of year, isn't it, April? People want to get out and either do duathlons or do running races to see where the form's at. With most of my athletes, I've not had them do any fast or hard running at all during the winter. So we've got a quote here from Jamie Turner. Do your easy runs easy and your hard runs hard. Using Gwen as an example, she runs 16k easy on a Sunday. She'll start out at 5.5 minute per k pace and increase speed to maybe 4:45 per k pace. So that's like 9-minute miles down to slightly under 8-minute miles for people who work in minutes per mile. So this is a lady who is a sub 16 minute, well, she's a 15 5k runner, isn't she, these days? Yep. She does all of her long runs really easy, and then when she goes hard, she goes really hard. There's actually a great article that he's written for 220 that I'd advise people to Google and go and check out, because there's loads of good stuff in there from him, basically saying, don't try and treat triathlon as 3 separate sports. Treat it as one sport and get your coaching advice from within the triathlon community, because it might be that your swim coach is saying one thing and doesn't understand what your run coach and your cycling coach are saying to you, and the advice in the sessions might be conflicting. And I think that's what we're seeing with our athletes in Team OA. They're sort of saying, look, I can't understand why I'm running so fast at this time of year. I've done no hard or fast running apart from a few strides at the end of a run workout. I've done all my hard work on the bike. I know you've been telling me all winter that hard work on the bike is going to translate into good run legs. Haven't really believed you, but actually I've just gone out and, I've just gone out and knocked a minute and a half off my 10k PB this weekend. Literally done no fast running. Yeah. So it's happy days, right? And I think the key to it is, I've told you this for years. You can only do so much hard work during a week of training. And if you're going to do it somewhere, it makes most sense to do it on the bike where you're not going to get injured until you get into your specific preparation for racing phase. And I was laughing with some of the guys this week and saying, coming from the world of running, people go, you have to do your speed work. You have to go out and do your speed work. Maybe you don't have to go out and do your speed work. In my world of running, I grew up with my dad in a run club, and people did the speed work, and I did the speed work with them. And that's when people picked up injuries and niggles, and it was kind of accepted in running circles as an aging runner over the age of 25. You just kind of manage niggles all the time. And there's that old joke about, if you haven't seen a runner for a while and you can't remember the name, you just ask him how the injury is, and immediately you've got some common ground to talk about. Maybe we shouldn't call it speed work. Maybe we should call it injury risk work. Because if we can get all of the results by going hard on the bike and going steady on the run, why do we feel that we're missing something by not running hard for a vast majority of the year? Maybe we're being smarter than runners are by training a different way. I don't know. Maybe in years to come, runners will be doing their hard work on the bike as well, and they'll be less injured because of it, Hells.
It's a really, really fascinating area, Rob.
It's even more so. It's been in my mind this week because obviously we had the interview with Joe Friel, and I sat down beforehand and I thought, Joe's done loads of interviews. What do I want to get out of this interview? Partly for the listeners, but also for myself. What am I interested in? I don't want this just to be another sort of, Joe started Training Peaks, Joe's written the Triathlete's Training Bible. And the thing that struck me when I've met him a couple of times is he looks super fit. I think he's 73 this year. He could pass for easily 10 years younger. He's in super good shape, and I thought, this guy knows how to deal with aging as an athlete, probably better than anybody on earth, from the research that he's done and from the books that he's written. So let's ask him about that. Let's ask him, Joe, I turned 45 this year. What does the path forward look like for me? And it was partly selfish, but it was also thinking a lot of our listeners are in that middle-age category and aging as we get older. And a lot of the common wisdom, in inverted commas, is us trying to do stuff that we did when we were younger, or listening to coaches who are coaching people who did stuff when they were younger. What have we got to look forward to? What's going to change? And how can we be smart going forward to? Because I want to be racing in 20 years' time. I don't want to do something this year that's going to mean I'm broken in 3 years, Yeah. So that was it. This is the gist of it. He really needs no introduction. Legendary triathlon coach, Joe Friel. Okay, so it's a great pleasure to be able to welcome Joe Friel onto the show. Joe, it's fantastic to have you on. Thanks so much for taking the time to come on. And I know we've had our fair share of traumas trying to get the call to connect to make this happen. So thanks so much. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Rob. Thanks for asking me.
And I believe are you in sunny Arizona at the moment?
I am. It's very...
A little bit warmer weather than we're having over here in the UK at the moment, I'd imagine. We're not jealous at all, Joe.
I can't blame you.
Hey, so listen, one thing I really wanted to talk to you about, I've thrown some questions out over Facebook and Twitter to the athletes that follow the show. And a recurring theme of things that's come back is, obviously you've written numerous books over the years, and one of your more recent books was focusing on the aging athlete and athletes who are still racing, as they're getting into their 50s, their 60s, even into the 70s. And it seems like, obviously, you've been the man all the way through triathlon and endurance coaching, and you seem to have tailored your work as you've gone along. And I figure there's nobody better to ask these questions to than you. So we're going to pick your brains, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, you bet. We'll see how my brain works today.
So listen, the first thing that came up that was interesting is what this concept is of what actually makes an athlete older. What makes an older athlete different from when they were younger? And how do we define old in athletics terms?
Yeah, it's hard to define, to start with your last question, it's hard to define old in terms of athletics terms because there are so many good athletes out there who are 50 years old, even 60 years old, who can still compete with young athletes. I see that all the time. So, it's a kind of a hard thing to nail down, but there are certainly some things that happen to us that cause us to take on the signs of aging athletes. These things are fairly common for most athletes across the board. I would say there are three things. I talked about these in my book quite in some length, but just to touch on them quickly right now, the first thing that happens to an athlete usually notices if they do any kind of testing or looking at data is apparently that their aerobic capacities or VO2 maxes are declining. And that's a fairly common thing to see. The research shows that your VO2 max will decline over time. When you're young, around early 20s or so, it'll be probably at its peak, but for the rest of your life, it'll tend to go down, and that really is related to how much activity the athlete maintains in their training, how strenuous it is. Basically, the more strenuous the activity is, the higher the VO2 max remains. However, it will still continue to drop as time goes on. So that's probably the first thing that shows up. And the research tells us there that you must keep on doing vigorous workouts, strenuous workouts, even into your 50s and 60s and 70s, if you hope to maintain it or to at least slow down the rate of decline. So that's the first thing that happens. The second is that we lose muscle mass over time. And there's lots of things going on there also that are related to age. Some of these have to do with hormones that our body produces. For example, testosterone, which women also have, and other hormones such as growth hormones, and the list goes on. There's quite a few. But these tend to decline as we get older, and consequently, we need to do things we can to stimulate them. And some of those things involve one thing I just mentioned, doing high-intensity training that stimulates these hormones that help to prevent the loss of muscle mass. The other thing is sleep. The more sleep you get, up to a limit, obviously, the more hormones you're going to produce, and the more muscle mass you'll maintain or even add as you get older. So sleeping is critical to the aging athlete. And finally, we tend to gain fat as we get older, and that has to do again with hormones. It has to do mostly with something called lipoprotein lipase, which is its only job is to store fat. And when your testosterone starts to decline, testosterone is a thing that kept it in check as you were younger, kept you from storing so much fat. But as you get older, there's less testosterone. Therefore, the LPL is more effective and more fat is being stored. And again, it's the same sort of things there. It's hormones, it's sleep, it's high-intensity training. It's things like weight training that stimulate growth, muscle growth, and so forth. So those are the three main things I talk about in the book, go into some detail about how the athlete can offset those changes that take place with aging.
Yeah, now, do you know, I'm going to go back to the first thing you said there, that the VO2 max decline. And for listeners who are not technically minded, can you give like a simple overview of what VO2 max means to most athletes, firstly?
Sure. It's the amount of oxygen your body can use to produce energy. Energy is produced from the fuel sources you've stored, such as carbohydrate and fat, but that has to be combined with oxygen to produce energy. It's much like your car. Your car uses gasoline, but it's got to combine that with oxygen to produce energy. Gasoline by itself doesn't power the car. It's oxygen plus gasoline. The body's the same way. So we need oxygen, and the more oxygen your body can process, the higher your VO2 max is. VO2 max is just a way of expressing the maximum volume of oxygen that your body is capable of handling. For example, world-class athletes typically have VO2 maxes in the high 70s. I won't go into all the details what that number means, but that's just a reference point. And as in younger athletes or younger non-athletes, let's say college students, will probably have a VO2 max if they were tested for any particular reason in the high 50s or low 60s. Females, by the way, tend to be about 10% lower. And so as we get older, those numbers decline because we become less capable of processing oxygen. And this goes back to basically this what I was talking about before, which is how strenuous the training is. As this number goes down, your ability to create energy therefore decreases. If the ability to produce energy decreases, then performance or how fast you can go also declines. And quite honestly, if this number keeps getting lower and lower and lower, it eventually spells doom. It eventually leads to death. That's the ultimate here.
It's pretty dark, that Joe.
Yeah, it's not a fun topic in that regard, but that's it's just one way of measuring how much longer you got to live is how much VO2 max you have.
Well, there's a T-shirt slogan in that. We could have "Keep training hard or die" on T-shirts, couldn't we?
Good idea.
One thing I'm really interested in here is then, obviously, there's a lot of data out there that shows, in a general trend, as we get older, the VO2 max decreases. Do you think that's a cause or effect, though? Is it a case that just because we get older, the VO2 max decreases? Or I'm sure you're the man who studied loads of people who've continued training 50s, 60s into the 70s. Can we mitigate the effects of that significantly by keeping training hard? Is it a case of if we keep doing the training, we're very much going to be able to keep on top of reducing that decline?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Let me cite one research study as an example of this. There was a study done back in the 1970s in the U.S. And in the study, researchers recruited a group of American national class runners. They were all tested for VO2 max. There were about 20 of them, if I recall right. I've got the exact numbers now. But there was a large number of athletes, and they had high VO2 maxes, as you would expect. There were national class runners at very high VO2 maxes. And then they test them again 10 years later and again 20 years later to see what happens to their VO2 maxes. Interesting what they found. The athletes who continued to race had no decline in VO2 max at all. They were doing hard intervals and they were still racing. And they were still producing the same numbers they had when they were 10, 20 years younger. Those athletes who quit racing, quit doing hard workouts, but just started doing long, slow distance jogs, they were losing performance speed, basically VO2 max, at the rate of about 7% per decade. So not quite 1% per year, but close to it. And those athletes who had quit racing altogether and quit jogging had just basically become couch potatoes. They were losing at the rate of about 10% to 11% per decade, which is about 1% per year. So the bottom line there was, and by the way, this research study has been done a couple of times, probably 3 or 4 times actually, and it found the same thing every time, that those athletes who maintain a very high strenuous level of activity maintain their VO2 max for a long period of time, as in 20 years in this case. Now, there's not been a follow study up where they've done those athletes in their 60s, for example. So we don't know the answer to that question yet. We may find out someday. I hope we do. But we don't have that research. My bottom line feeling is that there's probably still a loss of VO2 max with age, which cannot be stopped. It's going to happen. It's only a question of how rapidly it happens when we get into the upper ages, 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Yeah, sure. But the bottom line being that, man, that's really good news for triathletes, isn't it? Because if we can continue to train and train hard and train with intensity, and we can continue to avoid getting injuries, we can maintain that very high level aerobic fitness all the way through into our late 50s and 60s, as long as we don't have to take significant breaks from training, either due to injury or due to becoming a couch potato. So that's great news.
It is. And the one point, is consistency of training. You can't just do a hard workout, once every 3 weeks and hope that's going to do it. It's not that sort of thing. It's the sort of thing that has to be done on a regular basis, frequent basis, as in weekly. So that's what it's going to take. You can't just hope that you just do a hard workout, next month, and that's going to do it for you for the rest of the year. It doesn't work that way. It takes some consistency and frequency.
Yeah, sure. And I think this is one area where triathlon's really gonna help athletes as they age, because I grew up with a dad who was a runner, and all his friends were runners. And as they got into their sort of mid to late 40s, early 50s, they started picking up running injuries. Seemed to be, the talk seemed to go less and less about the training and more about the injuries. And eventually they all kind of drifted out of the sport because the knees went or the hips went, or they just couldn't train anymore. Whereas athletes who've got swimming and biking as well, there seems to be much less prevalence of these injuries getting picked up as they age. And hopefully that means, much longer.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing that a lot with the sort of the Ironman results, aren't we? I've been in Ironman since 2002, and sort of remember looking back in the day and thinking, well, there just weren't very many athletes at all over the age of 50 competing, certainly not above 55. Now we're seeing the whole general population age up, and it seems to be a sport that people are now, the 55 plus and the 60 plus at the moment are full of athletes competing still and going really, really fast. And I think we'll see that continuing into the older age groups as well, as it's almost like the popularity of the sport is aging with the population as well, right?
Yes, indeed. The baby boomers are changing the records as they age up. These records are changing dramatically, and the data we have is. I read the research back in the late 90s on aging for another book I was writing. At the time, there was hardly any research at all, but the research showed that when you hit age 70, it was kind of like a steep slide. You just kind of fell off the edge right there because there was hardly anybody over the age of 70 who was still serious about exercise back 20 years ago. Now, the data is showing that there's a very gradual decline, which is no different than the decline that took place in the athletes' 60-year age bracket. So that it can be maintained, but it certainly is. It appears to be that's going to decline over time. It's just that we have the power to slow that decline. Yeah,
sure. Now, something I'm really interested in here is the effect of how much extra recovery an athlete is going to need, and to get your thoughts on this. From a personal point of view, at 45 years old, I don't significantly feel like I need more recovery than I did at 25 years old after anything other than a hard running session. Hard running is where I notice it at the moment. And I'm aware that as the years roll by, that's probably going to change. So what's your take, your personal experience, and with the athletes you've coached, on how long it takes athletes to recover from the various kinds of swim, bike, or run sessions as they age into their 50s, 60s and beyond?
Yeah, that's probably recover as they get older, in their 50s and 60s and even obviously in their 70s. Back from a hard workout. I recall when I was on the track and field team, I was a runner, and our coach only knew one workout, and I called it intervals till you puke. We'd do the same workout every day. Basically, we ran 4 and 40-yard intervals. There were no 4 tracks here in those days. This is back in the 60s. So we ran these quarter-mile intervals. And there was never any indication of how many you were going to do in the workout. There was never any talk about how fast you should run, only that you should run faster than what you just did, if you're too slow. And there was never any talk about how long the recovery intervals were going to be. It was just up to the coach. Whenever he decided it was time, he'd blow his whistle and there we'd go again. And I did that 5 days a week when I was in college during the track season.
Wow.
Back in the 60s. That was pretty unusual. Anybody training the weekends was considered to be kind of weird. So we had 2 days off. So it was 5 days on, 2 days off. And the 5 days on were these killer workouts. And you could do 10, 15, 20 of those quarter-mile repeats in a session. And when the coach finally got tired of blowing the whistle, the workout ended. And so it was kind of like, it was one of the hardest thing I ever did in my life was running those intervals. And today, if I tried to do that, if I did one of those sessions, it would probably take me a week from it. Back then, it was every day, 5 days a week. So it's obvious to me that I've changed dramatically. Looking back over the course, that's 50 years I'm looking back. But I realized also in my 50s, I could still do some things that I could do when I was in my 20s, workouts. They weren't much different. But that began to decline in my 60s. I saw a decline. And now that I'm in my 70s, it's become a more obvious decline that I'm unable to do that anymore. So it comes down to the fact that I've got to be very, very cautious anymore about how hard the workout is, and therefore how much time I'm going to give myself to recover from it.
Yeah. And what's your weapon of choice these days? If you're going to give yourself intensity, do you choose it on the bike or in the pool rather than running? In terms of do you bounce back quicker from that?
Yeah, my advice would be for the triathlete is to do just that, to put more focus on the bike and the swim in terms of high intensity. That'll help to maintain that VO2 max, even for running. Not quite as effectively as it was if you did the running, but if you wind up getting injured because high intensity training, too much of it, then you're going to lose VO2 max and all in that sport dramatically. So I think what you suggest is probably a good idea.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Now, I know you've written a lot of very interesting stuff about the effect of strength training on athletes and its effects not just on sort of maintaining muscle mass, but other aspects of fitness, sort of bone density and things like that possibly, I think, athletes of my sort of age, I've never even considered bone density as something to think about until I read your articles. So yeah, would you talk a little bit about that for us, please? The effects, the positive effects that strength training has, and what you mean by strength training, even.
Yeah, let me go step back and give you a reference point again. My son was a pro cyclist in Europe back in when he was in his 20s. He raced for many, many years, still races, by the way, but he's no longer racing pro. He's now in his late 40s. But when he was that age, he was spending hours and hours and hours on the bike, and like all pro athletes, pro cyclists, trying to avoid anything that would put stress at all on his muscles the rest of the day. So, a pro athlete would never go for a walk around the block with his girlfriend. That's like the last thing you'd ever think about doing. It takes away energy for your workout tomorrow. So he was tested back when he was in his late 20s, and he was tested as having the bones of an 80-year-old man back then, because he spent so much time on his bike, which does not do anything at all, at least noticeable, to improve bone density. So he was already in the early stages of experiencing the early stage of osteoporosis in his 20s. But he's not a triathlete. Triathletes have got running going for them. That is really one of the best things you can do as far as maintaining bone density in the lower body, pelvis, legs, feet, so forth. It doesn't do anything for the arms and upper body, or at least not much. And so this is where weight training can come in handy for the athlete, is maintaining the strength of the upper body and swimming either, even though you swim with your upper body. There's not enough load placed on the bones to stimulate them to maintain their density. So consequently, weight training is really something that's highly recommend for all athletes, but especially for older athletes. They really need to be lifting weights year round. It's the sort of thing that you really can't shove aside, because if you bypass it, thinking, well, you can do everything else you want, it's going to catch up with you. You're going to wind up being quite feeble and with easily broken bones, despite how many miles you may be putting in on your bike or running or swimming or anything else. So it's a critical thing you can do. It does not have to be traditional weightlifting. In my new Triathlete's Training Bible, which came out just a couple months ago, I explain there are other alternatives to weightlifting, traditional weightlifting. One of those is doing repetitions, force work on functional force work on the bike, and dry land for swimming, and for running also. And these are things that are, I won't go into all the details here, but they're workouts that can be done where you don't have to go into a gym at all. You can do them on your bike or at home or wherever you want to. So you can maintain or even build bone density by doing some of these other things for the upper body. Again, for the triathlete, lower body shouldn't, if they're running. So it's the sort of thing that is, I think, is critical for the aging athlete. And too many athletes quit doing it when they get older, which is a real shame. You continue to do things that put lots of stress on bones.
Are you an advocate of sports like yoga and Pilates that put a lot of, it's not the same, I understand it's not the same as, bench pressing or doing shoulder press in terms of putting stress on your bones and joints, but that kind of weight bearing exercise that you will do during yoga, is that something you think will help with bone density in that same similar way?
I think only if the person is already experiencing a high level of bone density. I think if the person has healthy bones, probably get out of that. It's going to take something that's much more weight bearing than that. And body weight is probably not going to do it for that person. Again, who's already, for the younger athlete who's been active, triathlete in the 50s and 60s and so forth, those people need to do something which puts a lot more stress on the bones.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. And one final thing on strength training. One of the questions that often comes up, and I'll admit this is a circle I've never been able to square. In terms of strength training in the gym and lifting weights, that the go-to activity for a lot of strength athletes has always been the traditional squat and the deadlift. Obviously, that's tremendously useful at building muscle mass and putting all that stress on bones for bone density. But triathletes who are trying to run and bike as well end up completely ruined for 2 or 3 days afterwards. Sure, what's your advice for sort of strength training for the lower body for triathletes? Is it as simple as, well, you're already doing strength training because of the pressure you're putting through your muscles during cycling?
No, it's not the same thing. Although there, as I just mentioned, or is described in my book, the athlete does need to be putting stress on the bone. When do you do it? That's the question. And the answer is, in part, year-round. But it's a periodization question is what it really is. It doesn't mean that you're doing extreme, 2 or 3 times a week year-round. You can't do that. In the gym, for example, lifting weights, doing squats and deadlifts, as you mentioned. And those are exercises to be doing. It needs to be periodized. It needs to be early season base period, early base period. Effort is going into weight room stuff, and there's not a whole lot of swim bike going on relative to the rest of the season. But as the season progresses, as you move through the base period, less and less weight training is done, and more swim, bike, and run is done in its place. And so consequently, there needs to be this balancing that takes place year-round. And it runs in cycles. So you go through your first A race, and then you go back serious in the gym, putting more strain on the bones. And then as you get close, start moving, at least before your race, you back off of it. You go into a maintenance program, not a strength building program, but a maintenance program. And that maintenance program just keeps the system operating until you get to the next cycle where you go back to the weight room again. And so this continues year-round. It's not like you just go to the weight room 2 or 3 times a week and kill yourself, 52 weeks out of the year. That's not the way it works. It's a kind of thing where you do that, be too tired. So it's got to be organized. And again, this is all in the training Bible, all the details of how you periodize all this stuff.
Yeah, good. Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense, actually, that you've got to think of that as another sport that is going to negatively affect your cycling and find a way to combine it and basically back off the cycling and running at the times when you're doing that strength training and accept that as we get older, it's just got to become an extra thing that you have to do more of in order to maintain that bone density. That makes a lot of sense, Joe. One last thing I want to ask you about here before we go into listeners' questions. you've obviously written a whole book on nutrition with Lauren Cordain. What are some of the nutrition tips that you can pass on in terms of the way that you think a diet for an athlete should change as they get older to stop that sort of descent into putting on weight and getting fat, essentially?
Yeah, one of the things that came out, the research, very topic, what should aging athletes diet? Came out of that was the research shows that eating more protein in the diet helps with muscle mass, especially when it's combined with high intensity training and traditional weightlifting. So eating more protein would be one of the answers to that question. But the problem is you can't just simply add more stuff to your diet. Don't want to be taking in more calories. Something has to go. You have to give up something. And I would suggest with athletes that comes down to junk food. Our people in our society way too much packaged junk. Some candies and all these sugary products that we wolf down all the time are just totally a waste of calories going into the body, and they really produce little in the way of performance. Even though we've been told for decades that this is what you have to be a good athlete, there have been many athletes who show us not what you have to do. Lots of athletes who are not taking in high levels of sugar, and they're doing quite well. So I think that's a change that we're seeing coming about now with nutrition. There's a movement towards, especially for longer distance events like Ironman, there's a movement toward more a high-fat diet, low-carbohydrate diet. The ultra-distance runners were among the first to do this, and they've pretty well shown us that you don't have to have high carbohydrate, especially if you're doing long-distance events that take hours and hours and hours. So an LC athlete wants to consider a touchy subject for people. I'm afraid nutrition has become something like talking about religion or abortion, and people get angry when the topic comes up, long opinions on it, and they're unwilling to even consider another way of thinking about their nutrition.
Well, do you know, if the advice is as simple as all you've got to do is reduce the amount of junk food and sugar that you eat as you get older, then it kind of makes sense, doesn't it, really? Nobody can be too shocked by that.
No, that's not easy. That's the easiest answer to the problem. What do I do about my nutrition as I get older? Yeah.
Okay, listen, we've got some questions here from listeners that they've sent in. A lady called Michelle Padovan's written in to say, I'm considering racing an Ironman this summer, but I'm going to be racing the Ironman without a power meter. So in this whole world of power technology and data analysis, what advice would you give to someone who's considering racing without a power meter over the iron distance? Is it too old school, or is it still a safe approach?
Well, I'm assuming this is always a problem when you answer questions from athletes. I don't know anything at all about the person. Is it somebody's doing their first Ironman? Is that what she was? She's just doing an Ironman.
She's done a couple before, I believe. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, having a power meter is quite honestly almost like cheating. It gets so easy. Not having a power meter is a great dilemma. I'm trying to meet out your energy over the course of several hours on the bike, for example. And the bike is really the key to the Ironman distance, as it is to all triathlon events, by the way, because it roughly makes up half of the race. So a power meter certainly makes it easier to do. Once the person gets a power meter and learns how to use it, they're amazed at how easy it is to know what they should do to do well in the race. For example, once they figure out their functional power, FTP, with more details on number, Ironman, I can tell them their intensity needs to be between 60 and 70% of their FTP. So above 70%, they're going to be on the podium. 60 are the cutoff. 50% of your functional threshold power have enough energy to run them. Without that way of measuring what's going on, you're kind of doing all this. Start to run, you're guessing again Do I have enough energy to get the run without walking? So it's not necessary, but it makes it so much easier to do. It's almost a no-brainer to figure out how to get one of these things. And prices are coming down. They're roughly $800 US right now. I don't know if that converts to in pounds, but probably something like about 1,000 pounds or that neighborhood would be my guess. But anyway, so it's the price is coming down, and it's the sort of thing that if you have it, know how to use it, it'll make it so much easier to train and race.
Yeah, totally. Great answer. Thank you. A question from Mike B on Twitter. How do I plan and practice race day nutrition so I get the right amount of energy? That's a great question. It's a golden ticket right there, isn't it?
You bet. Yeah. And the athlete does a race rehearsal workout, which should be roughly once a week for the last 12 weeks before a race. Every time you do one of those races, you rehearse what nutrition is going to be like during the race. So you're practicing, and you're not just practicing, you're also making a decision on whether or not I'm doing the right thing. So it's kind of a rehearsal for the race, and it's also a test to see if you're doing the right stuff.
Do you have any rough guidelines in terms of like calorific numbers per hour, say, that you recommend for athletes to take when they're racing?
It used to be very easy. You just had to look at what was the person's body weight and how long were they going to be out there, and some simple math, you'd come up with a number of calories. I'd rather not give you a number of calories right now because I don't want people to think that I'm guessing what they should be doing, because I have no idea their body weights or how long they're going to be on the course. And so it really comes down to your chronic diet. If somebody's eating a high carbohydrate diet, meaning they've probably got somewhere around 70% or higher of their total calories every day come from carbohydrate, then they're going to have take in a lot of carbohydrate during the race. And for long races, that'll be a problem because the stomach can only handle so much stuff in it during an Ironman distance before you wind up feeling nauseous and bloated and all sorts of problems creep up on you. So that's a real problem. For the person who's eating a high fat diet, they don't need nearly as many calories. They can get by with, maybe 20% of what the other, the high carbohydrate is taking in during the race. So they have much of gastrointestinal problems because of that. Probably not going to become nauseous and so forth. And yet they'll still get enough energy because their body is adapted to using fat for fuel. And even the skinniest athlete has at least 2 days of fat stored away in their body, 2 days of exercise. So they're not going to run out of energy.
And one final question from Andrew Rudder, who says, have you got any plans to release, like you don't have enough writing work already, Joe, do you have any plans to release a new updated version of the Cyclist Training Bible anytime soon?
That's a good question, because it's coming out next month.
Oh, perfect timing.
I spent the middle of April. It'll be on the bookshelves and available in places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and so forth. Everything that's on. And also, ebook will be another 2 months after that. It takes them longer to get the ebook done.
Hey, well, listen, Joe, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. We really appreciate it. And I've loved talking to you. There's been an absolute ton of wisdom here. And for people who want to find out more about you, you're basically all over the internet, aren't you? We've got Joe Friel's blogs you can go and check out. We've got all the articles on Training Peaks. Is there an easy way for people to contact you if they've got questions to follow up on this?
The best way would be a blog, joefrielsblog.com. That's probably the most direct way to get to me.
Great stuff. Hey, well, listen, thanks very much. We look forward to seeing that new version of the Cyclist Training Bible when it comes out. And it's also worth giving a shout out to your book, Fast After 50, I think, with the things we've been discussing today, which goes into a lot more detail about the different methods of training and the way we can fight the idea of getting older necessarily means getting slower.
Right. Well, thanks. I enjoyed talking with you, Rob, and happy to do it anytime.
Pretty cool having him on the show, Hells.
Very cool. Very, very cool to get him on.
I was a bit starstruck. I don't mind telling you, I was a bit starstruck.
But it was interesting about what can we do now, which means that we can still be racing in 20 years time. And from a personal point of view, I felt pretty broken and pretty wiped out in September after Ironman Wales, and it was difficult to at first adapt to just thinking, you know what, I'm just gonna have a bit of an easier year. I'm not gonna do anything.
Yeah.
She says too crazy, or maybe I shouldn't say too crazy. Let's say I'm not going to do an Ironman this year. And I want to do a few other things, and I kind of want to go back to enjoying it again for what it is, rather than thinking I have to do this, I have to do that, and taking some of that, like, I don't know, passion and enjoyment out of it. But then I do hope that doing this will then keep me motivated to carry on and to really enjoy it and still want to race and stuff in 10, 15, 20 years time.
I think it makes a lot of sense for almost every athlete who crosses the finish line of an Ironman to commit to themselves they're not doing an Ironman next year, and to not think about that thought again for another 4 weeks. But then after that 4 weeks is up, to give themselves the out to change their mind if they want to. Because I think you've worked, especially with the case of Ironman, you've worked so hard to get there. You've done so many hours. For most people, it becomes something of an obsession. And I think a lot of people, as you insinuate there, cross that line from I'm doing this because I enjoy it to I'm doing this because, I'm getting really good at this and I think I really want to do a good performance, to sometimes getting to the point where they don't even really remember why they're actually doing it and start to resent the hours they're doing. It's a good time to take that break and go, right, I'm not going to do one next year. And then if you change your mind, brilliant. The only caveat is, if you tell your wife or husband that you're not doing one next year and then you change your mind, then you're in deep trouble. I used to do this all the time and cross the line and go, that's it, I'm not doing another one. And my missus would go, yeah, well, you said this last time and the time before, and it's okay, you can change your mind in a bit. So take that time, I think, to give yourself that mental break from it, because if you have committed to a big stretch of training, you need a break to do something different. And you know what, mate, if you race this year and you do some fun stuff and you go and do I bet you're entered into that race where you win a trout again, aren't you?
Oh, yes.
Is it Winkle, the Winkle Trout Run or something?
The Winkle Trout Run.
Great. Yeah. Get out and do something like that and have some fun.
But you know what I'm doing the next day?
Oh, go on.
Well, the Chester Diva Olympic race. I was too tempted by the trout.
Outstanding.
Yeah, so my legs are going to be absolutely wrecked because it's a fell race. So, yeah, there we go.
Well, do you know what? You don't know what you don't know. Get out there and do it, and you might find that your legs feel fine the next day. Exactly.
We'll
go with that.
I'm doing a 5K run this Sunday. Hilariously, it's called the Gold Run. But you have to wear a yellow T-shirt for it.
Oh, brilliant!
Yeah, it's sort of celebrating all things Commonwealth Games. So I'll take a photo.
I bet that'd be brilliant. Yeah, do definitely.
Yeah.
Hey,
interesting.
Do you know what? I saw a bit of sad news. Did you see that Nikki Bartlett's had to withdraw from Ironman South Africa?
Yes, she had a bike crash.
What happened to her? Do you know? I know she's in a bad way, but
I don't know what happened on the actual bike, but I know she's a little bit. I think she said in her video blog thing that she had put up, a little bit of concussion and stuff. So she's made a sensible call not to race Ironman South Africa, but instead she's going to race Lanzarote. So I guess it's having that setback, but then pretty quickly setting yourself another goal and saying, right, that's next, that's what I'm going to do. So yeah, I know she was feeling in really, really good shape, and she said that as well, that she sort of feels in the shape of her life, and ahead of
broken
Ironman,
fingers, it says. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Head of Ironman to South Africa last year, she had a cold before the race, so again wasn't quite able to show what she was capable of. So roll on Lanzarote, Rob.
Yeah. And, best of luck getting well again, Nikki. Sorry to read that. But as we said, Ironman South Africa coming up this weekend. Massive race. We've got Lucy Charles, Susie Cheetham, and Emma Pallant making her Ironman debut there as well. So a lot of British interest. It's going to be it's good, big old race. Looking forward to seeing that.
Can't wait. Did you see Lucy Charles is down to do Roth, Rob, as well?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. Great.
I wonder how fast she can go on the Roth course.
Well, we'll find out, won't we?
I wonder how fast she can go in the swim on the Roth course. It's like a massive 50-metre swimming pool for her, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
We want Lucy out in 45 minutes. That's what we... Could be doable.
Could be, couldn't it?
There's been a lot of 45-minute swims in that kind of range at Roth if they get the distance right. So, yeah.
It's honestly. So
Intriguing.
Robert, here I've been. Well, it's when you watch the swimming on the Commonwealth Games on the TV and you see them do 50 meters in 21
seconds.
21 seconds. It just puts into context everything, doesn't it? You think, wow,
it's nuts. I was watching it with my son and he was going, "Could you keep up with them, Daddy?" And I think they were doing 100 and they went through the turn in, 23 seconds. I was like, no. I'd be just reaching the wall now. Yeah. He's like, oh,
you're rubbish.
Yeah. It's cute. He thinks I invented triathlon. But you invented triathlon. Why are you not at the... Why you had to do the thing at school, like the what you do, the parents go in and what you do kind of for a job kind of thing. So that was fun explaining that to 5-year-olds. And he's like, the kid got to an instructor. He's like, my daddy invented triathlon. It's like, no, I didn't invent... My daddy owns triathlon. No, he doesn't own triathlon either. So his teacher's going, what is it you do again? What?
What?
Oh,
you don't work in an office? What?
Yeah. Oh dear. Gotta love it.
Oh,
right.
It's brilliant.
I suppose we should pretty much wrap this up, shouldn't we? I guess.
Yes.
For this week, before we waffle on forever and ever. Just a final shout out. Thanks very much to our sponsors, precisionhydration.com. Remember, you can get yourself £9.99's worth of free precision hydration with the code Oxygenaddict. And also massive thanks to our patrons. Our patrons special podcast will be coming out next week. I'll send you an email with a link to that if you're a patron. And if you're interested in becoming a patron and sponsoring the show, that'd be awesome. You can just follow the link on the side of either the website page, or we've got a link from our show notes to that as well. You can either do a monthly donation or an annual donation, and that would be super well appreciated by Hels and I. And lastly, send in your nominations for the Tribe Triathlete of the Month award. You can either email helen@oxygenaddict.com or help@oxygenaddict.com. Send those through. We'd love to have loads of nominations this month. There's been loads of you racing we've seen on Twitter and Facebook. So nominate yourself. Get it in there. We'd love to go through and see what people have done. If you've had a good race, don't be shy. Get yourself nominated. You could win yourself a big old packet of Tribe goodies. So get those sent in. Or even nominate a friend as well. Hels, you have a fantastic time out in Australia for another week. You lucky little sausage. What have you got lined up this week coming?
Finishing off the Commonwealth Games, they finish on Sunday. So yes, more hard work, and then a week in Sydney. Woohoo!
Lovely, good stuff.
Yeah, but yeah, hard work first, and then Sydney.
Not jealous at all.
No,
all right, everyone.
I am living the dream.
All right, cool stuff. Well, we'll tune back in next week then. Thanks for listening, everybody. It's been the Oxygenaddict Triathlon Podcast. I'm Coach Rob Wilby.
I'm Helen Murray.
And until next week, have a great, safe training and racing week. We will see you all again soon. We've got interviews coming up over the next coming weeks with, amongst others, Terenzo Bozzoni. So, yeah, check it out and listen out for that one. Thanks, everyone. We'll speak to you again soon. See ya.